Democrats' part of the bargain. Stop coming up with radically new and often terrible ideas and then in the next breath insist there be no debate about any of it. That if you don't see it right away and go along, you're bad, stupid, and deplorable. As if you were saying, duh, 2 + 2 = 5, isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious you can't add. You can't just say math is racist, queers for Palestine, looting is cool, healthy at any weight. If the men's football team played the women's team, it would be a
The Democrats are struggling, and Bill Maher says he understands the reason. On a recent episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, the candid host held nothing back while analyzing why the party has been losing support in various parts of the country. With upcoming midterms approaching and 2028 already on the horizon, he cautioned that the Democratic National Committee could face another difficult stretch if it fails to overhaul its strategy. In his view, repeating the same messaging and tactics might come at a serious political cost. As always, tap subscribe, get ready, and let's jump right in.
Insane, but neither do they make it clear they disapprove of the ones who are, and their cowardice in not marginalizing their own crazies has been their downfall. I couldn't get Neil deGrasse Tyson, a genius scientist and preeminent scientific voice in the media, to agree that it was ridiculous for Scientific American and The Atlantic to be claiming that separating sports by sex doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. Actually, it makes perfect sense. And it's obvious that it does.
Bill Maher doesn't hesitate to outline what he sees as the Democratic Party's core missteps. In his assessment, the challenge goes beyond ineffective messaging. He argues that forcefully promoting ideas many voters perceive as disconnected from basic science or everyday common sense can create political risk. When leaders appear to embrace positions viewed as overly ideological, he believes they may push away the moderate voters often crucial in national elections. Maher also expresses surprise when prominent public intellectuals enter these debates. He has pointed to figures like Neil deGrasse Tyson, widely recognized for championing scientific literacy, suggesting that when experts engage in culturally charged discussions, critics may see the lines between empirical science and political interpretation becoming blurred. In Maher's view, that dynamic can leave voters uncertain about where objective analysis ends and advocacy begins. His broader argument centers on priorities. When a political party seems more focused on niche cultural flashpoints than on everyday economic concerns, often described as kitchen table issues, it shouldn't be surprised if polling stagnates or electoral momentum slows.
And there's a lot of stuff like that on the left. And when conservatives see it, they say, I'm sorry, we're just not going to go along with reinventing society, often pointlessly, even if we have to cancel democracy to do it. That's what they're saying. They see gender as only a construct and sex is assigned at birth, and they say, we're not doing that. Transing kids by self-diagnosis with no age limit, no parental notification, and no acknowledgement of social contagion, not doing it. Asylum now covers any reason for anyone to come to America, not.
Bill Maher takes his critique a step further by identifying what he believes are specific ideas hurting the Democratic National Committee's broader appeal. He argues that some voters feel unsettled by positions they interpret as attempts to revise long-standing scientific or historical frameworks. When messaging focuses on redefining complex subjects such as gender or social identity, in ways that seem abrupt or highly theoretical, he contends it can generate uncertainty rather than unity. Maher also points to the heated debates surrounding youth gender issues, particularly discussions about parental roles, consent, and medical decision-making. These matters, once considered niche policy conversations, have increasingly entered mainstream political discourse and become major cultural flashpoints. His overarching concern is strategic. By leaning heavily into culturally polarizing debates, Democrats may distance moderate voters who might otherwise align with them on economic policy, healthcare, or governance. In Maher's view, that shift in emphasis risks slowing electoral momentum and narrowing the party's coalition at a time when broad appeal is critical.
Count anymore. Whiteness is toxic. Penises in women's prisons. Welcoming the intifada. We're not doing it. And so, folks, If we are ever going to get back to the old America, that's got to be the Democrats' part of the bargain. Stop coming up with radically new and often terrible ideas, and then in the next breath insist.
Bill Maher takes his critique a step further by identifying what he believes are specific ideas hurting the Democratic National Committee's broader appeal. He argues that some voters feel unsettled by positions they interpret as attempts to revise long-standing scientific or historical frameworks. When messaging focuses on redefining complex subjects such as gender or social identity, in ways that seem abrupt or highly theoretical, he contends it can generate uncertainty rather than unity. Maher also points to the heated debates surrounding youth gender issues, particularly discussions about parental roles, consent, and medical decision-making. These matters, once considered niche policy conversations, have increasingly entered mainstream political discourse and become major cultural flashpoints. His overarching concern is strategic. By leaning heavily into culturally polarizing debates, Democrats may distance moderate voters who might otherwise align with them on economic policy, healthcare, or governance. In Maher's view, that shift in emphasis risks slowing electoral momentum and narrowing the party's coalition at a time when broad appeal is critical.
Get right away and go along. You're bad, stupid, and deplorable. As if you were saying, duh, 2 + 2 = 5. Isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious you can't add. You can't just say shit. Math is racist. Queers for Palestine. Looting is cool. Healthy at any weight? If the men's football team played the women's team, it would be a tie. You can't just say shit.
Criticism emerging from parts of the left has grown strong enough that even longtime liberals like Bill Maher have begun speaking out about it. What concerns him most is the sense that some positions are no longer framed as ideas open for discussion, but as conclusions that must be accepted outright. In his view, when disagreement is labeled a moral failing instead of an opening for dialogue, it undermines the open exchange that democratic systems rely on. Observers who share this concern argue that such an atmosphere can leave people worried about public backlash or social ostracism simply for voicing a different perspective. Rather than fostering thoughtful debate, it can create pressure to align with a dominant narrative. Maher's frustration centers on a strategic principle. Lasting political support is built through persuasion, not compulsion. When meaningful debate fades and one viewpoint appears to crowd out others, some voters may feel sidelined instead of represented. And that feeling of exclusion, he suggests, can translate into tangible consequences when ballots are cast.
Going out of their way to post messages on social media about the current Trump administration and what's happening to American lives. The problem is they're all literally saying the same damn thing. Don't believe me? Check it out.
If I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
That ain't true. That's what you just heard. Since day one of Donald Trump's presidency, prices are not down, they're up. Inflation is getting worse, not better. The prices of groceries, gas, household
Now you see why Stephen A. Smith was in the polls as a presidential candidate? You see what I'm talking about? You see that idiocy right there? You talk about something.
Stephen A. Smith has also weighed in on what he sees as a strategic misstep for Democrats: the reflex to frame nearly everything Donald Trump says or does in the harshest possible terms. In his view, constant outrage can lose effectiveness when it starts to feel routine rather than persuasive. Smith notes that strong anti-Trump messaging was a central theme even before Trump first entered the White House, yet it did not prevent his initial electoral victory. What surprises Smith, he says, is that despite that history, some political voices continue to rely heavily on the same tactic. Rather than centering their message on a forward-looking agenda, he argues, too much attention is often placed on countering Trump's actions point by point. According to Smith, many voters want more than criticism. They're seeking leadership, practical solutions, and a positive vision that moves beyond perpetual political conflict.
Hell, would 22 Democratic senators be literally echoing the same thing and think that would resonate with the American people? All it shows is that the same fabric of our democracy is unchanging. in the eyes of some of these officials, and as a result, the constituency they represent, which is why Donald Trump is in office. What, do I have to come up to Capitol Hill and give you lessons? Seriously, you don't get it? All you did, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Chuck Schumer. Let's all get together. Let's put this in a prompter, and all together, albeit in separate rooms, we'll grab a microphone and say the same damn thing. And that's what's going to resonate with the American people. And then you wonder why you're no longer in power.
Stephen A. Smith has been outspoken in criticizing what he views as inconsistency within the upper ranks of the Democratic National Committee. In his assessment, too much of the party's public messaging feels choreographed, moments crafted for headlines rather than focused on substantive policy outcomes. Smith argues that many Americans are preoccupied with practical concerns such as inflation, job stability, and rising living expenses. When leadership appears to emphasize symbolic statements over concrete action, he suggests it creates a disconnect. Voters, he contends, are more discerning than they're often given credit for. They can tell the difference between authentic engagement and image management. According to Smith, that perceived gap contributes to public frustration and weakens trust. Rather than relying on political spectacle, he believes Democrats would benefit from grounding their message in everyday economic realities, offering clear solutions and demonstrating credibility through measurable results instead of carefully staged messaging alone.
Local politicians, oh, inflation is high. Oh, look at them pointing the fingers at the migrants. Oh, look at them blaming immigration. They don't care about you. Oh, by the way, look, they don't care about you. Well, why would you bother people from the LGBTQ community? Why would you bother folks with transgender and all this? Why would you do that? That is what the Democrats say. That's what most politicians would say. Here's Trump. They're pieces of shit. They don't give a about you. It's rigged. They've hoodwinked you all the time. They think you're a freaking joke. They give you the thing anytime they want to. Here's Trump. Them. They ain't worth shit.
Stephen A. Smith draws a pointed comparison between the style of Donald Trump and the leadership approach of the Democratic National Committee. In Smith's view, Trump's political strength stems from his blunt delivery. He names problems directly, speaks in plain terms, and promises fast action. That tone, Smith argues, resonates with voters who value decisiveness and clarity. Whether supporters agree with every policy or not, Trump often projects a sense of certainty that reinforces the perception he stands by his words. By contrast, Smith contends that the DNC frequently relies on tightly managed messaging and strategic positioning that can feel overly calculated. He suggests this approach sometimes fuels skepticism among voters who wonder whether leaders are being fully transparent. For Smith, authenticity has become a powerful form of political capital. He believes many voters gravitate toward figures they perceive as straightforward and unfiltered, while communication that feels overly scripted or ambiguous can gradually erode confidence and credibility.
Followers say, yeah, that's how we want you talking to those politicians who've been stealing our money all of these years. It's not what he says. It's how he says it. He does it with vitriol and venom to show a disrespect to politicians who the public have no respect for because they feel they've been hoodwinked by those same politicians. He's using it to separate himself from the cesspool that is Capitol Hill. And how does Capitol Hill respond? By showing them they're still Capitol.
Stephen A. Smith argues that Bill Maher recognizes something many elected officials miss: a deep well of public frustration with the political establishment. According to Smith, Maher channels that sentiment by openly criticizing leaders, institutions, and decisions he believes warrant scrutiny, often in blunt, unapologetic terms. That directness, Smith suggests, connects with audiences who feel their concerns are diluted or sidestepped by conventional political messaging. Smith believes this willingness to challenge authority, regardless of party, gives Maher credibility. By contrast, he contends that the Democratic National Committee can sometimes appear overly cautious, which may be interpreted as uncertainty rather than resolve. In Smith's view, voters are increasingly drawn to boldness and clarity, particularly in a climate marked by skepticism and distrust. His takeaway is straightforward. Authenticity and direct engagement can capture attention and help rebuild trust among disillusioned segments of the electorate.
Did you see when they said, "We don't believe there's a Trump mandate"? I said, "Oh, really?" Did you see the former press secretary for the White House come on? "I think Stephen A. is wrong. I don't believe what he said is correct. Donald Trump has the lowest approval ratings in the first month or so, or the 2 months of a presidency in American history." Oh, really? But didn't he win all the swing states? Didn't his popularity elevate within 89% of the counties in the United States of America? Didn't his popularity elevate within the Black community, the Hispanic community?
Taken together, the critiques from Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith sketch a challenging outlook for the Democratic National Committee. Though they come from different professional worlds, both point to what they see as the same underlying problem: a growing disconnect with voters. In their view, many Americans are looking for candor, clarity, and workable solutions, not ideological inflexibility, political spectacle, or nonstop outrage. They argue that part of Donald Trump's appeal lies in his projection of decisiveness and authenticity. Whether one agrees with his policies or not, they suggest his communication style conveys conviction. Their warning is direct. If Democrats dismiss internal dissent, sidestep open debate, or rely too heavily on performative politics, they risk losing further support among everyday voters. For Maher and Smith, the prescription isn't complicated. It centers on listening more carefully, engaging more openly, and rebuilding trust before frustration hardens into long-term political rejection at the ballot box. That wraps up today's discussion. If you found it insightful, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.